Welcome to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast, where we bring you the most interesting and enlightening conversations around movement practice and how you can become the most heroic version of yourself through pursuing movement that's relevant to your nature. This is a podcast that's going to feature some of the top movers in the world, some of the most amazing movement thinkers, and people from fields that are related to movement as far afield as evolutionary theory, strength and conditioning, and everything in between. So if you're interested in movement, please stick around. And if you like our work and want to support it, please consider supporting us on Patreon, because this podcast is completely listener supported. We don't want to take any advertising. We don't want to interrupt your experience of watching the show. So what really helps us get the best thinkers on, have the time to put these together, have the best quality for you guys as far as audio and video, is your support. So please consider supporting us and enjoy the rest of the show. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. So my guest this week is Nate Weston. Nate Weston is one of the top free runners in the world. He's a member of the TMPST freerunning team, and he's winner of the North American Parkour Championship style and Apex Movement International style as well, I believe. He's multiple-time finalist, or at least two-time finalist at Red Bull Art of Motion. And he's just come out with a really beautiful new video called Skull Chatter. And Nate is also a former student of mine who did his first formal parkour training with me at my old facility that I used to work at, Parkour Visions. So it's really nice to see Nate. I haven't seen him in a while, and we just have a wonderful conversation, kind of digging deep into his process and his experiences kind of coming up in the parkour industry as an athlete, what he's been through, how he's developing artistically, and what went into development of this really beautiful project, Skull Chatter. So if you haven't seen Nate's video, Skull Chatter, go watch that first and then come back and watch this podcast. But if you're interested in knowing more about what higher level parkour athletes go through in the process of what they're doing, knowing what it looks like to become a competitive parkour athlete, knowing what the process is and the experience of it, this is a great conversation. Nate's an extremely articulate young man who, has a lot of insight through the intensity of what he's done to reach the heights of his parkour career. So without further ado, I'm really excited to present Nate Weston.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think the last time that you and by the way, welcome Nate. Really excited to see you. How you been?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Been good. Very, very excited to have Skull Chatter all done, and just kind of seeing the response has been amazing. When you work on something so hard and for so long, to have such a response like that, just, especially in these times, is really meaningful. So I appreciate you taking the time to have me on and get a little more in depth about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we were just talking about when was the last time we saw each other. If I remember correctly, I think the last time was actually at a speed competition at Parkour Visions back before they closed.
Was that at Waterfront?
No, I wasn't at the one at Waterfront. This was in the actual facility.
Oh yeah, dude, that was like 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Holy crap.
So how old are you now? I don't even know.
I'm 23, about to be 24 in February.
So you were 15 when we met?
I was either 15 or 16. Yeah, I came to the gym. I came to Parkour Visions for the first time in 2012. So that was 8 years ago. So that would put me at 15. Yeah. Yeah, dude, it's like, doesn't make any sense, but it's such a crazy thing to be able to go back in time, and have you like in the picture and like a part of it. Is such a crazy thing. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's been a while. That's such a funny thing, because I always like to tell the story about it because I think it's so funny. So you grew up on Vashon Island, right? Which is just sort of west of Seattle. It's a ferry right away. And there was a couple of the kids who were in your gymnastics program who had come over to train at Parkour Visions, Roman and Jordy.
Yeah,
Roman,
that's right.
Kids. There I was like, oh yeah, no, you got to meet Nate. Nate's the guy. Like, he's doing all this crazy stuff. And you've been free running on your own kind of after you left your gymnastics gym. The gymnastics gym kind of shut down, your program stopped, right?
Yeah, the program stopped. We had a really good head coach, and yeah, he like moved to Arizona or something, and just the boys program was just like dwindling. The numbers are just so low, and once he left, that was kind of like the last straw. And so yeah, I just was like, all right, I'm done. And I was already feeling really not stoked about gymnastics at all. Like it just, yeah, just super strict, super like it feels like there's no creative kind of control as an athlete in gymnastics. And I was just kind of fed up with it. So once he made his kind of his departure, I just saw it as a sign. All right, I'm going to go back to basketball and soccer, which I grew up doing as well, as like being on my trampoline, as a kid, thinking that was like the solution, I guess, to it. Cause honestly, I mean, it's crazy to think, but like as a 12 or 13-year-old, how like stressed out I was just for gymnastics. Like it can be pretty crazy. And, so yeah, I was very excited, and it was a kind of a sense of relief to be done with gymnastics.
You were done
But
at gymnastics 14?
I think it was 2010 actually. So yeah, I was like 13 when I stopped gymnastics and I did 2 years of basketball in high school, or 8th grade, and then into high school. Um, and throughout that kind of process, I was still I felt like I was missing something. Like something was not like inside or right. It felt like something was missing. And I knew what parkour was at the time. But I always kind of had in my head, like, not impossible, but like, I'm not going to be able to do that. Like I just do stuff on my trampoline, and, I did gymnastics, and that's as close as I'm going to get. But I just kind of slowly transitioned from trying to kind of reenact tricks on my trampoline to just kind of taking them off the trampoline and taking them to ground, and then realizing like, oh, like, as long as you take it slow and like, one step at a time and just kind of staying within your comfort zone, it really is possible to do. And this kind of like fire got lit inside, and, it was like from that moment I just was hooked. And yeah, that was 2012. I think that was the fall of 2012. So 8 years ago. Yeah.
So I always remember this because I'd heard about you before you showed up, right?
Really?
And so
I didn't know that. Yeah.
that you were going to eventually show up, right? It was like, they're kind of like, Ramon and Jordy were sure that eventually you'd come over, basically, was the thing. 'Cause you were already doing the skills, right? And you were already at a high level before you even showed up at the gym. But what I remember is that the first day that I met you, I was sitting in our office space, basically, and I was just looking out on the kind of like all the different classes that were going on, and there was a level 1 class, a beginner's class. I think it was being taught by Brian Unger, if I remember correctly, and the class went to get a drink of water, and you were hanging out, just sort of chilling, waiting for them to come back. And you walked over to the edge of a vault box, like a 36-inch vault box, and you did a press to handstand on the edge of the vault box. Pirouette and came down. And I was like, what is this kid doing in a level 1 class, right? And so I walk over to you, and I was like, hey, I'm Rafe, tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm like, oh, I'm Nate. And I was like, okay, I have an idea what's going on here. So I was like, I don't think this is the right class for you. So I'm going to test you, right? I'm going to test you for our level 3 class. So I ran you through a series of tests, and you passed all the tests easily. And I was like, yeah, you can join our level 3 class. And you were shocked. Like you were actually surprised that you were to level 3. And so then you weren't going to continue in the basics class at that time, or in that class. So you climbed up on top of a box that we had, which I think was about 6 feet high, and then a resi pit in front of it. And you started working on gainer fulls off of the resi pit. And just then Yohan LaRue, right, who is one of the best free runners, he'd like finished in the top 3 or 4 at Red Bull Art of Motion, like 3 years running or something at that point. I can't remember. He was working for us as a coach at the gym. And so he walked in as that was happening. And so I was like, hey, Johan, come meet Nate. You guys are going to be friends. And so like I walked away and you and Johan were tossing Gainer Fulls off. So that was when you were, I think, 15 years old. So that was how I remember meeting you. So that was one of the more memorable.
I appreciate you like, refreshing my memory, because I definitely like wouldn't be able to like explain it that well. But I remember that. Like, yeah, that's so funny, because it's such an interesting thing how it all happened. And I remember when I first saw Johan, like he had a Team Farang shirt on, and I had like just shown my mom before I went to the gym, like, oh, like this is like what parkour is, and showed her like the X tour that Team Farang did like in 2012 across Europe. And so I knew who Team Farang was, and when I saw Johan wearing that shirt, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is where I need to be. And then having you be there, like, no, you don't need to be in this level 1 class, and being super supportive. It just was like, all right, like this is it. Like I'm gonna keep doing this for a while. Damn, that's crazy, man. Trip down memory lane.
Yeah. So then you were in my level 3 classes for just under a year, probably, or about that, before I left the gym.
Yeah. Because did you leave in 2013?
I left, July of 2013 was my.
Yeah. So it was about a year of being in classes with you, and so I met Oliver too, which is freaking crazy. And I mean, it's such a small world too, because he lives in LA. I saw him last night. It's such a funny thing, like how how your crowds kind of like, they pass, they connect and they go away and they come back, and it's really, really interesting.
So
that's a trip.
The kind of the reason that we got on this podcast was because you just put out this new video school chat, and I was really curious about kind of the process that went behind that and where you were at. And I found watching it really interesting. Is kind of like I felt like I saw themes in your development and what you were interested in and how things have changed over the years that I'd like to draw out. But one of the things I did see in that was Oliver at the end. So for those of you who don't know, Oliver, so Nate was 15, Oliver was, I think, 13 when you showed up. And he'd been training with me since he was 11. He was one of the most talented students that we had. And so you guys became like, best buddies, and you're training together all the time. And after I left, I think you guys just spent all your time in open gyms together and doing crazy stuff. Oliver's kind of gone in a different direction. He's more of like music now, as far as I understand. Still a freak athlete. But at like 16 or 15 years old, I think Oliver had one of the biggest standing jumps in the entire parkour community. It was like
he still has, I believe it is the biggest standing jump in parkour. Like after like 3 years of not training, he like, when I moved to LA, he came to Tempest, somehow became a coach like in one night and started teaching, and then was like training a bit. And like a few weeks in, he was doing every challenge that was like literally just impossible. Like, kid is insane. He's a genetic freak, dude.
Yeah. And so Mish, is Mish still on Tempest?
Mish is on the stunt team. But yeah, he's still a part of Tempest. But yeah, I think I really want to see them both in a room, just doing standing prees and just seeing what happens, because that would be the most entertaining thing ever. It's really, really close.
Yeah. So for those of you in the audience who might not be familiar with all that, everyone in the parkour world, Mish Todorovic is an athlete from Montreal who's widely been considered like the best standing jumper, and he's an adult man. So he's like 6'2", 3". Super
he's like
built.
A gladiator, dude. He's like, he's just, yeah.
Yeah. And he, I think he's jumped over 11 feet standing. Right. And I was one of the first generation of athletes who were getting close to a 10-foot standing pre. And so then it was like I was close, and then like Camila Brokaw was there, and a few other folks were close. And then I never got it. I think Justin did eventually get over 10 feet. And then Mish like comes out and he's like doing 10 feet 6 inches, and Dylan Baker's crushing it, and then Mish is going over 11, and it's crazy. So I knew that, and I'd seen him compete, and I'd seen him all doing all these things. And then I like run into Oliver, and it's like, oh yeah, we were doing freeze. And it's like only me and Mish could do it. So yeah, so Oliver, but Oliver had dropped out, and he got really mad at me after I left PKV because it just felt like kind of his community wasn't the same afterwards. So it was fun for me to see him as there supporting you at the end of that video and be with you. And I'd seen jumps that you did in one of his Instagram clips, so that just made me happy.
Yeah, it's good to reconnect. And Skull Chatter it's been one of the craziest projects. It's like definitely a dream project. It's been something that's been in my head ever since I started training. Like kind of that when you watch edits and you kind of make little like ideas in your head, and you're like, oh, I want to work towards this, but it's not really like you don't really work up to it and like have it fully accomplished. But this video for sure is like the closest thing to perfection in my mind and the way that I wanted it to become, which just makes me beyond stoked and grateful to have it like all said and done and wrapped up. But yeah, the whole thing started back in February. And so I had just become a member of Tempest on the Tempest Pro team last November. And so I moved from, I was living in Missoula at the time, and I moved from Missoula to LA. And, I think, and not from anyone else, but I just put myself under too much pressure. Moving to LA, it's like, all right, I'm trying to do stunts. I'm trying to like, make it work. LA is expensive, trying to make a living, doing this, ever since 2012, this childhood dream. It's like, it's right here in front of me. Like I need to make something of it. And I think I put too much pressure on myself and got into this weird slump where I couldn't really like enjoy training just because I would have too high expectations and nothing really lived up to it. And if you know me in parkour, I love my side flip rail precisions. And back in 2017, I had done at Santa Monica just on the one rail, just the side flip pre to the bar, and then kick back into full and back out, like dismount. And I remember pretty vividly at that session, like thinking, not actually like realistically doing it, but thinking like, oh yeah, you definitely like could go like plyo, like tunnel side flip from one rail to the other, and just kind of dismissing it just as a, that's too much. And I'm only here for like a week, so I'm not gonna risk breaking some ribs or who knows what. And so I remember when I was kind of getting into that slump when I first moved to LA, I remember thinking about that, and the Tempest Valley gym, the rails are very similar. Like the cage is very similar. It's like, I think it's like 8, 6, 8, the distances between the bars. And so it's very similar. I think that all of the Santa Monica rails are 7 feet across. And I was just like, all right, like for me, I need to like work on something with my kind of personality and the way I process things. I benefit a lot by just kind of obsessing over something and just like really focusing on this one thing. And it kind of, in a way, tunnel vision, I guess, just really focusing on this one thing. And, people want to be, call it Zen, call it, meditation or whatever. Like people want, inner peace. And for me, that's the way I do it, is just training and focusing on these things. And, I knew that like, okay, well, regular training, like it's not like doing the same my brain. And so I need to like really focus on something that's just like not out of my reach, but just so on the level of like, I have to spend so much time working on this. And I knew that like that Santa Monica side pre across the rails was like the thing that would really get me into the like really being focused. And so, like I just started prepping it a bunch in December. And I remember just like laying mats just everywhere because I was terrified, like just committing off of the rail and like actually jumping up and not just like straight down into like the gap in between to like play it safe and to try and like get my feet to the rail was just like the most terrifying thing ever. And I spent like a good, not too long, honestly. I think like probably like a half an hour or something on this one day. And I hit like I actually set and hit the second rail like on top with my feet, and then bounced back. And in my head, I just was instantly like, okay, like that felt great. Like it's so doable. Um, and it's one of those challenges that is so physically doable. Like when you really break it down, like it's nothing absolutely crazy. It's just all in here. And it's just like the rails, the height, everything just makes it terrifying. Um, and so then once I knew it was like a thing, I just would go to Santa Monica like probably once a week, or, just as much as I could on my off time, to just go up on the rails and just like on repeat, just run plyo not actually do the side flip, but just like plyo and like set the side flip and just like see how it felt and just get in a rhythm and just keep doing that over and over and over again. And I would kind of trick my brain into being like, all right, I'm going to do it right now. And then just seeing kind of how I reacted, I guess. And there'd be times where it'd be like, my adrenaline would like spike like instantly the moment I'm like, all right, thinking about side flipping this. And in those moments, I just knew like, okay, I'm not doing it now. And it was just kind of like a test, every time, every session, just kind of going there, walking away, going there, walking away. And then there's one day, it just seemed like everything leading up to like actually going to Santa Monica, it just felt like everything was working. Like it's like the smallest little details that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really mean that much, but it's like these little accomplishments just in life, or just, relationships or whatever, like just little things that happened that was like, like sick, like that worked out. And it just kind of like built up and built up and built up, to the point where it just like, it'd be wrong not to try it now, because it just seems like the portal is open. Like this is the moment to do it. And yeah, just like prepped it really, really slowly. And I remember very vividly just like having Oliver and Ryan Kelly, a homie from NorCal, they were filming, and just sitting there being like, all right, I think I'm going to do it. And just saying that, it was like this sense of like relief. And it wasn't like this adrenaline. It was like the sense of relief and kind of like peace. And just like nothing else mattered. It was just like, all right, I'm going to completely focus on this one thing, and that's it. And in doing like one of the most terrifying things I've ever done, it was actually like the most peaceful I've ever felt in my life, which is such a funny thing. It doesn't seem like those two feelings would go like together very well, but yeah, I think I did it in like 10 minutes, took like 4 attempts, and it was done. And I just hit it to double flyaway out. And then from that moment, I just knew like, okay, I'm not sharing this on Instagram. I'm just going to hold on to it. Like we all know about this, and I'll tell friends, but like, I'm not sharing this at all, because I just want to create something meaningful, like something, some project that means more than just the feat. It means the whole like meaning behind it, and just kind of reflect what I've been going through this whole year. And that was pre-COVID. And so that was not pre-COVID, but that was like when COVID was happening. So I thought it was going to be a quick project. Like, I don't know, having it done by summer or something. And then just realized like, oh, this is going to be a while, I think. I'd already kind of like hunkered down into like the commitment of holding on to clips, that I just embraced it. And went on a road trip with Kent Johns, and we just came back to LA and just got all the details done. And it's crazy. It's such a funny thing to look back on, because the start of this whole thing was 9 months ago, and to be here now, like talking about how it's all done and in the way that I envisioned it from back in February, is something that I'm so incredibly grateful for. So yeah, very stoked.
So there's a bunch of questions I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So the project came out of the desire to create a bigger kind of narrative around that particular moment, that's at the end of the video. Right? And so how many? Well, I'm curious, how many hours of filming did it take you to put together this 12 minutes?
Oof. Yeah, I don't know. How many hours? I would say, I mean, I have about like 2 terabytes pretty much filled up on my hard drive from the whole year. I don't know what that what that equals, but that's a lot of footage. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of training, a lot of filming. But yeah, again, it's like it's the whole point of the video isn't really necessarily to only be about like the feat of doing certain things. And to me, what I value a lot, whether it's parkour athletes or in any artist or in any industry, is someone's intentions behind it and why they do it. And it just makes them human. I mean, because that's what we all are, is just, we're just people doing things for our own reasons. And I just wanted to create something that just portrayed what I was going through. And in life, like things are never constant, and it comes in waves, and you have your ups and you have your downs, and sometimes like the ruts are a bit longer than the ups. But those in those moments of being like in the rut, like when it all like pays off, it makes it worth it. And so that was the whole point of the video too, is just to without specifically saying anything like a narrative in the video, to kind of portray these 3 different emotions. Like the first chapter being like really kind of like hectic and chaotic, which is like my signal to like overthinking and getting really in my head, to then the next one being like very calming and like how it kind of feels to be in the moment, in the zone. And then the very last chapter being like the kind of all the build up and all that, like chaos and calm kind of leading up into this moment, these moments of what it was all kind of building up to. And so I didn't want to ruin anything by specifically explaining like what it means, and kind of have it open to interpretation as well. Because again, everyone has their own battles they're going through, and their own way of dealing with stuff. And so we're going to have also a photo book or a magazine to go along. It's coming out this week, and that will have a lot of like the backstory and like where we went, and very specific kind of detail of like what was going on throughout the whole trip. So if people do enjoy the video, they can, because it is a free video. So if people want to help support the project, and definitely more future ones to come, grabbing a photo book would mean the most to me. And we're gonna have clothing as well. I got this hat, Skull Chatter hat, and yeah, just yeah, we got some t-shirts still coming in. We got to get samples soon. It's been kind of hectic last minute because of COVID, and like everything's just like all over the place. But we got a sick polo t-shirt, which I'm so stoked on. It's like a bumblebee kind of black and yellow striped one with like a nice embroidery, and yeah, just very, very stoked. Yeah.
So you talked about that's cool. I had a sense that there was an overarching narrative, but I didn't quite pick up on the exact things. I just watched it for the second time this morning. But I really liked how you could tell that it wasn't just a string of clips, that it had an overarching artistic intention behind it as well, which it seems like there's a lot less of that in the parkour community these days, right? The Instagram generation has not really made a lot of room for that.
Yeah, it's tough, because I think, again, everything kind of comes in waves, and I think in my opinion, I think like 2014 was like the like greatest time for parkour, and like that's when like everyone was posting YouTube edits, and like you said, like it's not just a string of like clips, just unintentionally like just throwing them all in whatever order just to do it, just because. And yeah, it shows so much more personality, and it shows so much more intention when people really take the time. But it's just become so, I think kind of a lost art in the recent years with Instagram, like you said. Just the incentive isn't there anymore. It's like, why hold on to clips for, a year when you could just put them all out and get just as much, if not more, recognition online. And so that's a tough thing, but I think the thing is just kind of really valuing the projects and the teams and the people that are, still sticking with it. And that was my goal as well. Is like, I want to like show like, Tempest and I, like we're really trying to do this for the culture, not to just be like, hey, this is sick and like, look at me. Cause that's not really what it's about. And on one hand, like, yeah, you want to be recognized for your craft, obviously. But you can definitely, there's a line that can be crossed and it can just seem like this is a bit too much and we kind of have to pull back. And I feel like the way that we're going now with Tempest and with everything, it feels really solid. And it feels like the culture definitely still has a lot of room, like in the community has a lot of room to grow. And I think it's just kind of, we're just in this weird like Instagram phase, but I think it'll eventually that'll all, in my opinion, that'll all die. Or not die, but I think that kind of stuff will fade eventually. And the things that will maintain and stay around are, the day ones, like the people who have just been in it for the culture and for the love of doing it purely just because they will love doing it. Those people and those teams and those groups and communities will outlast, any new trend that goes up in the next few years.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts more deeply on the kind of the culture and how it's developing and the influence of the different social medias and how you use them. But I want to dig more into your personal journey first. So when was the first year that you competed at Red Bull?
The very first year was 2016. The very first year I competed was NAPC in 2015, and that was kind of like my initiation. Like, all right, like this is like I got third place, so I was like, okay, like I can do this. Like, I looked up to all these people, and it was a great comp, and yeah, very friendly and just super sick vibes. I decided that like, yeah, the next year, like I'm gonna try and like really push like my skill level and just see what I can do. And yeah, that's what I did. Just 2016 came around. I just been working on so many things, and that was the year that I did at NAPC the side flip rail precision at height, and then kicked back into double flyaway, and that actually that got me into first place at NAPC in 2016. And oh yeah, I forgot about Apex International too. That was a few weeks earlier. The Apex International was in 2016. Like it was a huge competition. They flew in like, I don't know if they flew people in, but a bunch of people flew in like internationally. It was crazy. Like DK was there, Jesse Peveril was there, Brody Pawson was there. All these just legends that I've always looked up to, and never really traveled, other than going to Canada. And to have them all being in one area was just like insane to think about. And everyone's gonna be in this one gym just throwing down. And the style comp was like a b-boy style, so it was like battles. It was 1v1.
Yeah.
And I was pretty nervous going into it because I was like, all right, like I really want to like show like what I've been working on, and just kind of like not too much pressure, but I just wanted to like represent myself. And I actually ended up going all the way through and beating DK on the last like final and getting first at Apex International. And I'd made an Art of Motion submission a few months or a month prior, and I didn't get in. So I was kind of like, damn it, like that's it's okay. It's not like all my value is in this one thing. I was a bit bummed. And then once I won Apex International, like everyone was like, dude, just go to Art of Motion, like just go to Greece and do on-sites. Cause like, I mean, you beat DK, like just, you can do it. And I was like, oh shit. Like, yeah, you're right.
DK was champion in 2015 at Red Bull, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. And so then, yeah, so that led into NAPC, which again, I got first at from the side flip to the rail. And then, yeah, everything was just leading up to that competition in Greece. And, yeah, just solo. It was a bit intimidating because, I mean, I was not young, but I was like 18, 19, and never really traveled before. So going to Santorini was a bit of a new experience. Looking back on it, it was a great experience though. And yeah, I got in through the qualifiers somehow. I remember feeling kind of off. Was probably a bit jet lagged or something. Just didn't, wasn't really on my A game. But yeah, ended up making it to finals. And and I didn't do that great on my second run. But once you make it into finals, at least back in 2016 and 17, if you made it into finals, you would get automatically brought back the next year. And so I got into finals and I just kind of told myself, all right, 2017 will be the year where I just really, really try. But yeah, 2016 was the very first year that I did Art of Motion.
You had one of the highest scores in the whole competition in that first round in 2016, didn't you?
I think so. I don't really remember. I don't know. I'll have to go back.
I remember a couple years where Jesse LaFleur did insane full twisting
to cork off the arch.
Yeah, to cork off the arch and scored the highest score by far in the first round. And then I think the next year, I think that was the year before. And then the next year, I think was the year you were there. And I think you may have had the top scorers, you or maybe Joey Adrian. I remember, but then the finals were never as good as the first round.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone had that intention of I'm going to get the first run really good, and then I know I'm coming back next year, and then have nothing planned for the second run. It was but yeah.
We're back in 2017, and how did it go in 2017?
2017 was good. Yeah, I podiumed. I got second. I had my first one was really good. I felt just kind of showed off my style and did another flip to a rail at height, but mid run, which was a bit intimidating because I had there was the platform, and then there was a box, a square rail cage that was really, really flimsy and painted white. And if you don't know Santorini is the brightest place. It's just everything is painted white. It's all hard concrete. It feels like rock, and it's all painted white. And so it's just with the sun, it's just blind. It's so hard to see. And it was a step up. It was maybe a foot or half a foot up off the platform that it was connected to. And so I had to do my first half of the run. I did croc catch and castaway and some other stuff, and then made my way down the course, and then stepped up onto the rail, and then just side flipped on the rail. And I swear it was one of the most terrifying things. I just didn't know where I was. I was I think the rail is here, and just trusting that inner kind of cat instinct. And yeah, second run was good, and yeah, I ended up getting second place, which is just definitely a highlight to my competitive years of parkour.
Yeah, and then you also finished really well that year at Apex or at NAPC. Do they have Apex that year as well?
I think they didn't have Apex that year. They were trying to do the whole the France competition, and then it just kind of became the FIG thing, and it was just this whole they just pulled out. But 2017 in ABC, I got second as well. And I also went to China that year too and got second. That was a year of just getting second place.
Did you go to Airwhip too?
To Airwhip, yeah. I didn't make it to finals at Airwhip, but that was a really fun journey because I started off in Airwhip and competed, and then did a whole 6-week European travel in the wintertime, and that was a really fun time.
So I wanted to go back to all that because it was fun for me. I was kind of separated from the parkour community, building my own brand, and it was kind of because I was going deep into nature and all the other stuff connecting into parkour. It seemed like people in the parkour community weren't as interested in what I was doing, and I was just kind of separated in my own world there. But it was really fun to see one of my former students, just crushing it and killing all these competitions. I was also really proud of Joey Adrian because he's kind of part of our community. I felt
Yeah.
like in 2015 especially, I felt like people internationally didn't really respect the level of parkour and free running in the United States. And so then you guys who are from not just the United States, but from Seattle and Portland went out there and just crushed it. I took a lot of pride in that. So I was watching that, and then, I had a sense that I know Joey kind of lost his passion for the competition. And I had a sense that something similar was going on with you. When I watched you at Red Bull, when was the last Red Bull you did?
That was last summer, or last October, and I was in Matera, Italy.
Yeah. I had a sense that you just weren't excited about it, that it didn't have there wasn't the same sense of recklessness or flow or just desire.
Yeah, it's interesting how it kind of has faded, at least. And I talked to Joey about this as well. We both feel kind of similar, I think. But it just kind of it got to the point where, and not to sound like egotistical at all, but it's like when you go into a competition from, I guess, me or Joey's perspective, it's like you have everything to lose and nothing necessarily to win. Not that money is the point of competition, because again, the competition's like, it's about you versus you. But when the incentive for winning isn't really that high, besides just trying to beat the odds again, kind of, it just feels like pointless pressure on yourself. And like, what's the point of doing that when you can just train and feel like just stoked about that? Because I think in the early kind of years when I first started competing, it was the main focus wasn't to get money or anything, but it was just kind of to prove to myself that I guess I can belong in this kind of ecosystem of really big athletes, and people that I always looked up to, and to be able to kind of be in the same competition as them was just like the biggest sign to myself, like, all right, like, you're like, this is like, you're doing good, like, there's like reason for all these long nights of training and all this hard work. I think that's what it was. It was just kind of like, once you create this kind of that acknowledgement within yourself, competing really isn't that fun. And it's just like, yeah, it seems kind of pointless, which sucks, because it's really fun to compete when it's like, you have homies and it's just like a friendly competition. But sometimes people can get kind of competitive, and it's kind of easy to lose sight of the deeper meaning as to why why we all train. Like, it's, to me, it's like, it's the most fun thing, and I don't want to risk my body for this 5 minutes of fame on Red Bull, just because, like, and maybe risk getting hurt and then not being able to train and properly enjoy freely moving. And so that those kind of little, it's not necessarily one thing, or one aspect of it that really kind of deters me from competing. But it's just kind of a combination of those things, I think. And it just makes, competition feel less rewarding. But I definitely want to get back and do skill. I always did style, and now I'm like, I could do skill, I feel like, and that would kind of bring back like the beginner, that kind of like feeling of excitement of like, oh, this is new, and I get to see how I like, place amongst people that I really look up to and I aspire to be like someday. And so, yeah, I think that's the key. I'm going to try and do skill, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to see you do some speed too. I think you did speed the last time that we did a competition together. You skipped out on the style, so there wasn't any point for you competing style in a local event. And you did speed and crushed us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I
3
should
or
do
4
speed.
seconds ahead of everyone else on those courses.
I'll do skill and speed next thing I get the chance to compete, which probably is anytime soon due to
Yeah.
everything. But yeah, it'll happen.
So it's interesting. I mean, I think that like in a naturally competitive sport like basketball or baseball, the fun is in the competition. But I think that tension that you're talking about is something that I've seen like a lot in the parkour community. Like I remember talking to Brandon Douglas about this as well, and Dylan Baker. It's like it's a nice stepping stone for a young athlete to start getting noticed. But once you've reached a certain level of prestige, there's like no value add. It's not you don't get money and once you have enough eyeballs on you, you get more eyeballs by just going and making a cool edit. So it's not a good, it's not great from a like an incentive structure thing. But it also feels like I've seen like Chris Sharma talk about this as well, and like Rock On. It's like the joy is in the challenges that you find in the environment, and like being in this hyper selected specific space where you all have to do exactly the same thing isn't really what the practice is about or why it's enjoyable.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's the thing is it's like parkour is very similar to rock climbing. That's a good good reference because I think like you said, basketball and soccer, all these like team sports are inherently like they're just competitive. Like that's what the whole point is. Like in basketball, you're trying to beat the other team, and so it's really easy to kind of like if you weren't competitive in basketball, it'd be like, well, why are you playing basketball just to make 6 shots? Like okay, like but yeah, it is different. Like it's parkour is challenge based and from what you want to do, and like that's where the freedom is. And so that's a really good point. That's really interesting.
So I was curious, after you're sort of like coming to the end of the passion for competition, if that was somewhat like, just because of the theme of this video is that feeling of chaos or being down or having too much stuff going on in your head. I was wondering how the competition played into that. Like, you're coming to the, that was what, like summer of 2019. So, you joined Tempest in November. It's kind of like not that long apart. You're moving to LA and you're trying to figure out what continuing to have a career in this and be able to pursue what you love looks like. And I'm curious how that played into that experience of coming into the doldrums.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely had a big role in that kind of not downward spiral, but that kind of feeling of just being like, I don't know, like what I gotta like kind of not reinvent myself, but just figure out what it is I want to keep doing and what I want to, do long term. And from, after NAPC last year and Art of Motion too, just kind of being like, all right, like I don't think it's competition. And in the previous years, in any sport, like you'd be a fool to think that you're going to be at your tip top shape for your whole life. Like that's just not a given. And so I knew that, at some point it's going to come to an end. And I just assumed that it wasn't, in my mind, I assumed it wasn't going to be that soon. And that early on into my training, I guess, to be like, like having a hard time with competition. And so I think it was kind of a combination of not necessarily just the lack of desire to compete, but it was like almost like this overthinking thought of like, why do I feel no desire to compete? Like what's wrong with me because like this is the thing that I've like, had so much success with over the years and propelled me into becoming who I am now. So why can't I just like keep feeding the fire? But certain points sometimes you just run out of fuel. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned a lot from this whole year, and it's just ever since moving to LA and everything, is just that things come in waves, and just because you feel a certain thing in one moment doesn't mean that's going to last forever. And it's just about as hard as it may be, just kind of taking one step in front of the other and just keeping on. And it's hard. It's tough. But I think you got to just, again, like I needed something to like really focus on, like, especially with this year, like with COVID and like not like really seeing anyone, being in LA, like don't have any family here. I'm just kind of like here and there's friends here and it's great, but I'm not really supposed to go see people. And so I can get kind of like, all right, like what am I doing? Like I'm not really working either. Like it's just kind of like weird. And so this project was a great thing just to focus on. And I think that's the thing that, I think people need, especially nowadays with how much, stuff virtually and Instagram and all this stuff. It's like instant gratification. But things take time. And I knew that this project was gonna be was just this long period of time where I'm just hyper focused on this one thing and just making it as refined as possible. And honestly what got me through the year for sure. And it definitely helps kind of going into the next year, knowing that it's like this is possible. And I want to compete, do skill, do speed, but my worth as an athlete and as a person isn't in how well I do in competitions. and it's in doing projects and doing meaningful projects like this, and propelling myself into whatever the next opportunity is, trying to do stunts and do whatever is best for me long term, mentally and physically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I kind of had a similar experience in some ways. Like I never had the same level of success that you did, so I didn't have like, oh yeah, I won these competitions and I'll continue winning these competitions, and I got a lot of attention for it. But I went through a period where I was highly motivated around competing in parkour, and and then there was a point where I thought that was what I was about. I thought that was where I was going. And when I tried to get myself to go train to do it, I just didn't care. Right. So for me, like, I'm trying to remember back, I think it was 2011. So 2010, I tore my Achilles tendon. And then I was able to come back and compete at American Ninja Warrior. And I was able to outcompete Tyson, outcompete Justin. I was like, oh shit, I'm doing well, And 9 months later after this Achilles tendon tear, and then I put on the first like outdoor big parkour competition at the Gasworks, and I did pretty well at that. And then I went to Apex and competed in freaking Vibrams, which was a stupid idea. Didn't do as well, but I did all right. But I felt like, okay, cool, I can do this. And then going into 2012, it was like I just wanted to play in the trees. I didn't want to. And I felt like in order to be good at competition parkour, it was like all the competitions were indoors, and it just wasn't motivating for me. So I can imagine that, the sense of like, your identity as an athlete and where you fit in the sport has shifted away from what you were doing, but you can't quite imagine what it's like. And imagine that'd be massively more dislocating for it to happen at like, you'd be like 18, 19, you're traveling the world, you're getting recognition, you're winning, and then you just don't have the same drive to do the same things. So I'm
yeah. And it's easy to get kind of stuck in that negative loop of thoughts of being like you said, like why, like it's like you just can't even like bring yourself to be excited about like training indoors. It's just like what it's almost like a flip gets switched, and it's just like all of a sudden things are different, and you haven't had time to like fully kind of come to terms with what that really means. It's just kind of like, all right, like you're getting thrown into this next kind of like state of life in a way. But yeah, I think from my perspective and for me, the whole just the last year, not doing very well in competition, definitely long term was very actually good for me, because for a while it did feel like my self-worth to me was how good of an athlete I was and how well I did in competitions, which for a to a certain extent, I think that is what kind of is determines a successful athlete, because they keep themselves to this really high expectation, and that's what keeps them going. And it's a very, very rare trait, I feel like, to kind of keep, and not luck, but to keep that rate of success up and up and up is really hard. And so to people who can keep that up, it's very amazing. But I just learned that, okay, like, you know, I felt so bad after Air Whip, and it almost like ruined the whole trip in Europe. Like 6 weeks after that, like I didn't do very well in Sweden, and which is crazy to think about. It's like this one performance, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't really mean that much. And to have it low key, like, ruin a 6-week adventure, like new experience, going to different countries, like a proper life experience, and it almost ruining that, like the fun in that is pretty crazy. And that definitely made me question, you know, my intentions as an athlete as well. Like it made me kind of go through it again. And I remember one of my first classes with you at Gasworks. I remember we had like a big circle of the level 3 class, and you're going around asking everyone when we were warming up, like, why do you train parkour? And everyone like gave like an answer, like, oh, like I want to, like, you know, physically just like get like stronger and you know, see what I can do. And that was kind of like the idea of it. And then I said, because it's fun. And you just were like, that's the answer I want to hear. And and I remember that very vividly, because it was like, okay, yeah, like that's, you know, and when it comes down to it, when everything else is not there, competitions, video projects, like there's just this enjoyment, pure enjoyment of the movement, and that's what keeps you there. And it just kind of, yeah, it had me kind of finding the joy and like that beginner kind of feeling and sense of enjoyment from when I first started training, and that was a really cool thing to find after, you know, 4 years of competing. So I'm very grateful. In the moment, it was kind of, you know, kind of shitty, being like, oh, I'm not doing that great. Like, self-worth is like not that great. And, you know, just things are getting, you know, tossed around in your head. But I think long-term it was for the better.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience. I've gone through those places where like your identity is tied up in something, and then it doesn't go the way you expect it to, or the way that you kind of are pushing yourself towards, or even like there's a sense where you think that you've set goals and you're moving towards those goals, but your motivation has already shifted, and you're stuck in this place where you're conflicted between them. That's kind of the sense I had of you at Red Bull in 2019. It was like, you look like an athlete who wasn't checked fully in there. That thing wasn't what you wanted to be doing at that stage anymore.
Yeah, no, that's how it felt. Like, it felt like I'm not focused on like what the judges want to see. I'm just like going to find what I think is interesting on the course. I'm going to do that. And that's what I'm going to do. And it worked out pretty well. Like, you know, for having that kind of mentality going into it, I'm pretty stoked with how I placed. But yeah, it's just like, all right, like I'm not going to, you know, go all out for this thing. But
I can see different from the athlete who competed in 2017. And yeah, so it's been a curiosity of mine. So yeah, so you like, it's funny because I've had this sense that once you realize the competition thing isn't necessarily where you're getting your joy from, and you come back to it, it's like you do it for the joy, and then to be part of the community, what you want to do is to share the joy, share the meaning in the process. And what becomes obvious at that stage is kind of like it's in creating some kind of art out of what you do that you're able to communicate. And I feel like I've had that conversation with Brandon Douglas. I've had that conversation with Frosty Zerno. I felt like that myself. It's like, I think this is exactly what I don't know. This is what I'm seeing from you. All right. So I'm curious. You said you want to compete again, but that where you want to be as an athlete isn't centered in the competition.
Yeah, not at all.
So this projects like the Skull Chatter project, that's kind of what gets your juices flowing at this stage.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's like, and there's so much longevity to it. And it kind of, I feel like the lines kind of get, there's like the athletic side of it, and there's like the filmmaking and the artistic value of it, and all these things that it's like you can like do parkour for the artistic value and for how it like feels like you're just creating art. And I feel like going into, as I'm growing older, that's a sick thing to be able to kind of tap into, and to have other avenues to go down, and not, be all right. It's this one thing or it's nothing. It's like that. That's a pretty crazy kind of commitment. And so to have all these different, aspects to parkour that can branch off of the sport that we all, love, is very, very healthy and very like, yeah, it feels good to know that like there's like it feels grounded. Like that's how I feel. Like I feel grounded. Like I can branch off and do other things. Like I can go skate and like enjoy the whole like process of doing that. I'm not like worried about like, oh, I should be training and getting ready for next competition or whatever. It's like I'm just trying to broaden my experiences and learn as much as I can, because I feel like that's the main thing about life, is just learning as much as you can and just kind of being open to all that. So yeah, I'm beyond stoked to have it like with that. Like that's the goal of the Skull Chatter and future projects for sure.
I was kind of curious about skateboarding actually, because I feel like skateboarding, I feel like there's a skateboarding aesthetic in Skull Chatter. It feels a little bit like a skate edit. And I've also noticed it seems like a lot of folks in the parkour community have kind of like started dabbling in skateboarding.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely I watch a ton of skate edits and am very inspired by it. I'm nowhere near as competent in skating as I am like in parkour. So I've only been skating for like a year. But the thing that I really appreciate in skating is the culture and the way, and seeing the way, and it's the whole history of it is honestly very similar to parkour in a way, I feel like. And I think there's a lot of similarities, given it's not a team sport. And it's really just about this one person's way of expressing themselves just through a board and some trucks and four wheels. It's just really interesting. And I think one of the things I love is like, having parkour and skateboarding in the way that they're similar is like, I remember this one kid, he's like some Japanese kid, and he did a double kickflip down the Hollywood 16 staircase and like clipped the last stair, and like landed it kind of like rough, like not very clean, but it was a double kickflip. It looked sick. It was crazy. And he like was like, no. Like he ran back up and was like, that was a competition trick. And then like runs back and then, throws the board down, goes back and just does a regular, just single kickflip, and just does it so beautifully that it looked just insane. And I think the thing that I really appreciate in skating and skate culture is that it's not all about the most difficult thing. It's about, in a way, the way it looks and how it's done, and just the creativity. And that's the one thing I really tried to do in Skull Chatter throughout the whole project was, obviously do things that were hard and that challenged me, but not just do something specifically based on difficulty. And that's a really thought to have. It really kind of opens you up to different ways of moving and different ways of thinking about moving. Because your environment changes all the time, and being able to kind of be adaptive is, that's the fundamental thing of parkour, is just adapting to your environment. And so it really plays into that for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting you brought that up, because I was watching Skull Chatter and I watched it once and I watched it again. I had the sense that like mean, I think that you were known for a long time as like one of the most progressive athletes as far as difficulty. Like, you know, I've talked a fair amount. I'm quite interested in the comparison between like parkour athletes and gymnasts as far as like how are we developing as a sport? And like, here's a cross comparison. It's like, well, you know, people triple twisting, are they double backing? Are they doing multi-twisting, multi-flipping activities? And it's like, if we're doing that without mats on irregular equipment, then I think that our skill level as acrobats is very comparable to what we're seeing in gymnastics, which is an extraordinary accomplishment. We can probably dig into that in a second. But you've always been one of those guys who like were at the top of that level. Like you and Eric and Zen and a few people were sort of pushing. Max Antel now, we're pushing how many flips, how many twists could be done. And there's not so much of that in Skull Chatter. And I noticed that, and it was very interesting as we're kind of coming towards the peak, and then there's this moment where you do the flip to the double back. And my interpretation of it was that you had kind of lost the motivation to keep pushing the edges of some of those things. And you were interested in, so in the beginning of the video, you do a touchdown rise to a cork, I think. Is it a touchdown rise to cork? But
it's like a helicopter kind of thing where it's like you hit your legs out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a double twist, right? Or a triple twist, right? So it's a you know, for you, those are relatively basic tricks, right? A cork and a touchdown rise, right? But the creativity is there. It's that helicoptero, and it seemed like that's kind of where what you were bringing, right? Is like bringing more towards the creativity. But then at the end, it almost felt like, but I can still throw this stuff, and I'm still interested in it. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to have that ability to go there, but I just don't want it to be all of what I offer.
I mean, you hit it really. Yeah, that honestly is like the biggest motivation. That was the whole point of the video, is like, you know, I still got it. Like I could still play with the big dogs. Like I'm still you know, I'm still trying to push my limits always. Like but also that's not everything. Like the thing that matters the most to me is like seeing the creativity, and I really appreciate you noticing that. Because that's exactly how the whole idea, the whole fundamental idea of Skull Chatter is that.
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad I figured it out. So what's interesting also is I think how much of Skull Chatter is parkour lines, right? Or, you know, they're non-acrobatic lines, let's say. So we don't get into the whole parkour freerunning debate.
That's another podcast.
You know, I would say that you've generally been more of a kind of a pioneer of the acrobatic side of the discipline. But I've seen in you that there's a curiosity about pushing yourself more in the strictly jumping, vaulting, kind of overcoming the environment side. And right at that kind of like, you know, as the music's building, all of a sudden there's all these lines where you're running long, complex footwork, up and down, ascents, descents, which is really fun for me as your old parkour coach to watch and see like you pushing the level on that. Like, I love the line where you do the Kong cat that's in the Tempest video from when was that, like 2012?
Yeah, that was the I Freerun LA 2012 video, or 2011. No, dude, it was like 2019 or 2009 or something. Not 2019. It was something. It was like so long ago. It blows my mind.
Yeah,
that Victor did that in 2009, dude.
So you smash that, but then you add that jump out to the descent. It was so beautiful and smooth. So yeah, I'm just curious about how you feel about those balances between those aspects of discipline, and what that evolution has felt like for you as your attention moves from one thing to another.
I mean, yeah, and throughout all my training, I always really admired athletes who, you know, if you go to a jam, you have people who specialize obviously and they're really, you know, really specialize in their craft in certain aspects of their training. And, you know, they'll stick to like either the floor or the bars or the wall, or, you know, they'll stick to their specialties. And I always valued athletes who were able to go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and be able to show versatility. And I've always felt that way. But then this last year was just, I just was getting so interested in like just pure parkour. I think it also comes down to, I was having a lot of lower back issues and like my hips were kind of getting jacked. And I honestly think it's just from like just a very flip dominant style. And it came, it started happening where I just like would just be in pain all the time. And I started training parkour to like strengthen up more and started weightlifting a little bit, not really anymore, but just kind of like trying to like just keep my range of motion like simple and not like flaily and, doing all these things. Um, and, uh, and it started like really physically being the most like healthy thing for me. And then it just kind of, because in my head, I always just thought like strictly parkour was boring in the beginning. I always practiced it a bit, but it was never like the focus. And then recently I've been able to kind of figure out that like there's a lot of, very simple and subtle things that, only like really a parkour athlete would be able to tell like, oh, that is like because he landed this way, or because like there's very specific things that are technically very difficult and creative too. And there's different ways of thinking about it. And kind of, that was another door that opened to all these possibilities of like, okay, like I could do the Kona cat, in downtown LA that Victor did. But I don't want to just do that. I want to do something else. And then, there's this whole other thing to do. And yeah, it spurs from just like this idea of like this is like fun. And like, it's just this excitement of just kind of, pushing your abilities. So yeah, I'm very stoked to be able to kind of keep on, keep the train going and just, feeling good about training. See the response for Skull Chatter has just been, incredibly, incredibly grateful for all that. And it makes all the, holding back for posting on Instagram, so much more worth it, just to be like, all right, this is like the whole thing, like right here, like this for everyone to watch. And, to see people respond so well is very, very cool. And, definitely want to keep doing more.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's funny listening to you say that, because I was like, kids, right? I feel like as you're like, I'm not nearly the parkour purist that I was back in the day, but like I was a super like parkour purist at one point. You're my student, you're such a good acrobat. So to hear you say that, I felt like 2012 Rafe was like cheering in the back of my head.
Making you proud.
With the parkour, come to the dark side. Just like I like flipping now, and I want to progress as a flipper or as an acrobat, but then I just get fascinated by the lines that are in the environment that involve just like, how do I get through here and how do I get through it fast? And we'll just go like a whole session will go by and I'm like, oh, I forgot to do a flip because everything else was fascinating to me.
Yeah, like that goes back to what Dylan Baker was talking about. I remember when he like started training. I remember we had this interview where he was saying like I just go out and I train. Like I don't specifically say I'm gonna do cat leaps today or I'm gonna do like Webster's or work on my back twisting. It's like, not to say that those are bad, like to have that kind of like regimen style training, but just to like, be mindful and remind yourself like you can just go out and just train to have fun and like just see what comes of the session. And if nothing comes of the session, like really it's not that big of a deal. Like, nothing like the world's gonna end or anything. Like, just have a lighter a lighter grasp on yourself. Like just
I love that idea. I think people can go too far the other way where they're like no structure all the time. And I've
exactly.
But I think it's really powerful when an athlete has the resource to just be like, I enjoy this and I can turn everything else off and not think about any of my goals. And it is just going to be enjoyable. I'm going to show up and have it. If you have that, that's the center of progression, really. Right?
Yeah.
If you're doing what you're supposed to do all the time and you're miserable because you're not enjoying it, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, really. It's so true. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your how you train, right? Like, what does training look like now? You talked about injuries. I heard I was talking to my buddy Dane, a mutual friend Dane, and he was saying that you had concussed yourself too many times doing Kong gainers, and you weren't doing them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing crazy, but I've had definitely over a handful of like, I guess knockouts or, hit my head pretty hard. And that's never good. It's never healthy. And I think it goes into the whole like, Kong gainers are difficult, so I'm going to do Kong gainers just because they're difficult, but like they are really dangerous, and like dash gainers or like cast gainers or whatever. Um, but yeah, honestly, this year has been physically like such a good year. Like I have had the least amount of injuries out of any year training. And I think it just goes to the whole idea of just doing things not because they're difficult, but just because they're interesting and fun, and not holding myself to any crazy standards, which is a bit unhealthy. But yeah, I think I think it's just a matter of listening to your body. It's really easy to like be like, oh, like my back hurt. Like I remember so vividly being like, oh, my back hurts. Like I had sciatic issues, and my whole like leg would go numb, and I'd be like, no, it's like it's just my body being silly. Like I'm just gonna go train and just like make it 10 times worse, and just like that would be like a reoccurring theme. And it just gets to the point where like your body's just like, dude, stop, like that's enough. But I'd still be so in my head, like that ego kind of being like, no, 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 like it's not, you're not supposed to feel this way, like it's supposed to be this way. And so to have that kind of behind me, and now I know, like I've experienced that whole kind of thought process, and now I can kind of learn from it. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm very grateful to have gone through it and had nothing absolutely like horrible happen, like a career ending injury or anything. It was just like some back pain or like shoulder injury, like AC joint or concussion or whatever. It's like there's things, they're basically minor things, but it definitely kind of put that mentality and that kind of ego in check, to be like, okay, like this isn't right. Like make sure to just check yourself a bit more, I guess.
Yeah. This last year, I worked at an insane clip because I had to save involvement play from the massive financial damages of COVID. So I averaged like 65 hours a week work from March through October, with multiple 90+ hour weeks, and maybe a 17-hour day. And at the end of it, I was crushed. It was like, it was weird because I didn't gain weight, but my body composition like took a massive hit. So I weighed the same, but I looked way worse.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I was like, well, at least I don't have to lose weight. I just have to, stay the same weight, but just do stuff.
Just get back into it. Yeah.
But it was, so stressful. Like eventually I was like using lots of coffee, just trying to stimulate myself, trying to do stuff. And so like that all ended, and I was kind of like in a place where everything's going to be okay for a while. And I was like, at the same time, I met Paul Check, and he has this whole idea of the 4 doctors, right? Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Fun. You need to have all 4 in your life. I said, well, I focused a lot on the movement. That's not actually what I need. I need to make sure those things are good.
Yeah.
So I was like, really listen to my body. Just gonna listen to my body. So that's been my whole thing recently. Is like, I went out to train the other day. I trained for 10 minutes, and I was like, oh, I'm not feeling it. So then I went for a walk, and I got tired, and I came home. And it was so interesting to give myself permission to do that. Like I feel like I needed to get started with my weight training program again. And I was like, Sunday was supposed to be my day, and I was like, am I ready to do it? And I was like, no, I'm not. So I didn't, and then I did it yesterday, and it was great. But
nice. Yeah.
That power to listen to your body, I think, is such a I think it's weird because I think a lot of times when people are not trained and they're disconnected from their body, they're not getting good signals from their body. They try to work out and it's hard and they're scared and then their body would just tell them to stop. But like once you're an athlete, like and you learn to push yourself and you learn what it feels like to be stressed physically. If you keep not listening to yourself, it's not a recipe for success long term.
Yeah, no, it's very, very unhealthy. And it's a balance. That's what it all is. It's like you said, like on one hand, there's like the most strict you could ever be in training, and then there's on the other hand, there's like I'm gonna do whatever. I'm gonna eat donuts all day. Just like silly, just complete disregard for everything. But yeah, like to give yourself permission to just be like, all right, I'm supposed to do this. I didn't feel it. Okay. Like, and not holding yourself to such like a crazy standard. And, it's such a powerful thing to kind of come to terms with that. Cause I think some people like they try and like have that happen and they think it, but when it really like, when that kind of aspect of training or whatever, or that mentality really impacts you, it's really, really healthy. It's not like just this one thing that will happen like, every so often and it'll hit home maybe once or twice a month or whatever. But like when you really kind of like believe it really promotes, it's like a relationship. Like it promotes a good, healthy relationship with your body. Like you're treating it with respect and it'll only be beneficial for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the whole idea of intuitive training, right? Or auto-regulating. Right? How there's what's on the piece of paper and then there's the person who shows up, right? Or what your goal is, and then there's the person that you are that day and what's available to you. And being able to actually find a balance between those is the real success in the long run. So what I wanted to dig deeper into, like what does training look like now? Right? Like how many hours a week are you training? Is it mostly skill work? How much is strength work? I know you've always been a big advocate of stretching. What does your training look like? How do you compare yourself?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the most lackadaisical that's ever been nowadays. But I've had training sessions, like proper training sessions, like maybe like once a week or two, maybe. Nothing absolutely crazy. But I never have noticed any like kind of amount of rust or anything being like, oh, this is really scary because I've stopped training or whatever. And it felt like it's feeling like nothing's really getting affected. Because it's like, I think, there's a time and place for everything. And, these past few months has just been, editing and working on details and like figuring this whole project out. And you gotta address, the situations at hand. And I think, it's very good to be able to, make the hard decision and prioritize what is actually healthy and what's long-term the most beneficial decision for you. And for me right now, I know like it's not necessarily just in training and going out and holding myself accountable to a standard that I have as an athlete, I guess. And so I just, I supplement that kind of the void of not specifically training parkour by just doing light challenges when I feel like it, in the gym or outside. I mean, it's like you're not really going out with a jam or anything anymore. So it's very, solo. And, just like playing basketball, skating, stretching a lot as well, doing weightlifting in any way I can just to keep my mind and body from, kind of getting too lazy. But yeah, just because it was very apparent to me where I would get like low key kind of like superstitious where I'd be like, oh, if I had ice cream for dessert, like I won't be able to do this skill tomorrow or anything. Like it gets to that point of being like really like negative and like really, yeah, it crosses the line. And so to be in a position where I can, I'm going to go home and see family next week for like 3 weeks and just be home and see my nephew and see my family. And I, especially this year with not really being around family and like close friends as much as I'd like I value that so much, to where like, I'm not too worried if I don't train, strictly every day. It just doesn't really, I'm not really holding myself like to that high of a standard. And it's nice to be able to make that decision and not be like, like I said, like superstitious, like, like I won't be able to do this project again next year if I keep this up or whatever. That's, these thoughts that kind of come in out of nowhere. But that's all it is. You just gotta like, you gotta hear those thoughts. Like everyone hears those thoughts, right? Like you gotta hear them and be able to address them. Like, it's not like the most successful people don't have those thoughts. Like they definitely do. It's just a matter of how they handle them. And that's what I realized is like, I always thought there was something wrong with me or whatever. Like I was getting like, it seemed like everyone else is doing great. And I'm just over here, just like in a pit of self-loathing and like just not doing good at all, mentally. But, I realized that that's not even the case. Like everyone's going through something, and it's just a matter of how you deal with it. And anyone can accomplish anything if everything goes their way. Like it just, like the people who are really stick it out and, ride the bumps, like they're just going through it no matter what. Like they're set like on their vision. Like those are the ones that accomplish those things that are pretty damn difficult. And it's been a really, really, like I'm very grateful to have learned that lesson now, because it's just such a valuable life lesson. And it's hard to kind of convey that message without actually kind of going through it. And going through it's hard. It's, it's not easy. But I think everyone kind of goes through it at some point. But I think those moments are what really determines kind of your future, or who you are as a person. But yeah, everyone goes through stuff, man. It's like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun someday to come back and talk a little bit about the way you prepared, when you were really focused on preparing and how you built up the skill set that you have. I have a sense that you're more that what's really interesting for you now is more the mental side and artistic side. So I think what I'd like to close on here is that quote that starts the video, Alan Watts, right? And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about how the mental side of your game evolved, and is Alan Watts an influence? Have you looked into some of these mental cultivation techniques as ways to grow yourself as an athlete and kind of overcome some of the difficulties psychologically that came through that experience of rising so far so fast and then finding that where you were wasn't necessarily where you wanted to be?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, yeah, in those moments of being in the rut, like I was just trying to latch onto something and figure out what was going on. And I remember hearing some quotes that were like some self-help quotes. And I was like, I think I remember it was like some guy named Alan Watts or whatever. So I looked him up and listened to some of his like talks, and, it was just very thought provoking. It's hard to specifically kind of pull any examples because he has so many amazing talks and just hours and hours of, you could listen to him for hours and just keep on getting more and more info. But yeah, the biggest one was that quote that started off the video, where it's a person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about it at all. And that was exactly what I was going through. It was like I was just thinking all the time, and it was just this negative loop of just all these thoughts, and I couldn't have any time to focus on anything, even training, because of the negative thoughts. And then he called it chatter in the skull, and just right when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like, if I make this video, like I have to pay tribute to that quote and just call it skull chatter. And like, yeah, that was the whole backstory to using that quote and the title of the video.
Nice. Do you practice meditation?
I don't. I sometimes I'll do like some breathing exercises with like this one app for like kind of increasing your lung capacity. And in those moments, I'll just like listen to music and just kind of zone out. But I think my meditation is, obviously training, but my meditation really is just, you know, it's really simple. It doesn't necessarily mean just sitting in a quiet room and closing my eyes and not thinking, because I find that very, very difficult. And something that I need to get better at and maybe try a bit more. But my form of meditation is just, it can be as simple as just putting some earphones in and just listening to music and just going on a walk and just appreciating things. And that to me is really helpful. And just kind of focusing on that one thing. And that to me is my form of meditation, is just really being hyper focused on whatever that one thing is. And whether it be training, whether it be, art or whatever, it's, I feel like it's a universal feeling that can be, translated from sport to sport or craft to craft. It's really, yeah, it's interesting.
I bring that up just because that idea of the chatter in the skull, that's essentially, at the center of any meditative practice is essentially learning to still that, right? To find stillness internally and to practice non-attachment to the chatter that's happening in your skull.
Yeah.
So it can be very useful when that becomes a problem. It doesn't have to be sitting, but sitting practices, it's hard to get started with, but it can really help. So I think that's a good place for us to finish up for today. I'd love to have you back and talk more about kind of how you get into your mental state as an athlete and how you work with the flow process and how you prepared yourself. But I really enjoyed this conversation and kind of getting an insight into the journey that brought out this piece of art and what that piece of art meant.
I appreciate you taking the time to have me and just, having these quality, good conversations means a lot, again, especially in these times. So yeah, thanks again for having me. And it was good to, catch up and relive some good memories.
Yeah. So Skull Chatter, it's out. Photo book's coming out. T-shirts coming out. Anything else people should know about what you're doing with Tempest? Anything cool coming up?
The videos on Tempest freerunning on their YouTube, and we're gonna do a behind the scenes of the Santa Monica Side Pre, dropping Friday, December 4th, along with the clothing, some hats, and the photo book is available for pre-order as well. So that should all be available when people probably listen to this and see this. And just kind of, appreciate you listening and taking the time to just elaborate on these really interesting thoughts. And I'm excited for many more projects to come.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you come up with. Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, man.
We'll touch you soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to the Evolve Move Play podcast. If you want to support what we're doing, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notifications button so you know what's coming up. And of course, the biggest support you can give is to become a Patreon supporter. This is what's going to allow us to grow this platform more than anything else. So this is entirely listener supported, and we really appreciate your support. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.